moving forward in your career and whatever else. I mean, we want to talk about, best practices for entrepreneurship and so on. I'm right in there too. It's just that the acceleration for that is kind of hampered if you're not navigating properly, and you can't really navigate properly if you're not healed.
Right.
So it's like a boat, right? Most of the time people are like, I want to do this. I want to learn these things. I'm going to be faster, quicker. That's like me taking the boat and saying, I'm going to polish the hull. I'm going to make a stronger motor. I'm going to do all these things. But one, we don't know where the boat's going. Two, boat's got holes in it with anchors all over the place, stuck in the reef. That boat ain't flying. The thing that's hard is to heal up the anchors and the holes. Mm-hmm. That's where most people, and that's where we get voluntold into. And that's where that dark night of the soul comes into play.
All right, welcome back to Hawaii Real, everybody. I'm your host, Io Ke'ehu, and I want to say thank you to Hawaiian Springs Water for being our beverage host for this episode. I love this guy's water. It's alkaline water. It's great stuff for you. A little bit healthy. Taper off that gravy after the locomoco, all that acid. And if you haven't yet, please subscribe to this channel on YouTube. And for all our listeners out there, you can find us on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon Podcast. It's now on Pandora. And if you like what you hear, please go ahead and subscribe, follow, and leave us a comment as to what we're doing. Leave us a review and tell us how we can improve. And we'd love to hear from you. And you never know what we might come up with in our next episode. Today I have it with me, great guest. He used to have his own podcast, one of the podcasts in its early heyday, Evan Leong. He's the owner of Brain Game Hawaii, and he's best found on LinkedIn. Brain Game Hawaii. What did I say? Brain Game? It's from that TV show. It's from that TV show, Brain Game.
But it's gain, like, instead of like brain drain, it's like brain gain.
Brain gain.
Yeah.
It's all about the gain and the protein. And he's best found on LinkedIn, right?
Yeah.
Even though you have Instagram a little bit.
I don't really go on Instagram too much. Yeah.
That's where I found you on LinkedIn. And you were a lot into coaching, leadership, mentorship, that kind of thing on LinkedIn. Mm-hmm. And we were just talking off camera a lot before we even got started here. And you were getting real deep into the dark night of the soul. And this was kind of the first time I've heard about this. But John Garcia, the house that we're at, the Garcia house, he was kind of in on it too with a conversation we were just having. Can you get into a little bit of that and the spiritual aspect of what you were talking about with regards to the dark night of the soul and changing from who you were to what you are to who you're going to be? Is that what it's about?
I mean, I found it on one of those Oprah shows on YouTube. So she was talking with this guy, Michael Beckwith, who was in The Secret. He used to have the dreads, but now he's shaved it off. And he talked about Dark Night of the Soul. And I think what I understand from it, which is probably way better just to watch his video, is that you are no longer who you used to be, but you're not quite yet who you are becoming. So it becomes really dark. It's scary. And I kind of looked at it like a hermit crab when it's moving from the smaller shell to the bigger shell. That intermediate period where it has to go from the smaller shell to the bigger shell is super scary, right? It's super vulnerable to every kind of predator out there.
That's what the biggest risk is.
It's risky. Yeah, it's spooky. And then it's hard because where do you go for guidance in something like that, right? So that's something that I see kind of a lot. I've gone through it myself. I probably continue to go through it myself. You know what I mean? So,
because a lot of what you do has to do with entrepreneurship and helping others and also yourself.
I think what I primarily do is I solve problems.
Okay.
Probably because I'm good at getting into problems. So I got to get good at getting out of problems, right? So, yeah. And entrepreneurship is kind of like that, right? You're looking for a problem try to provide a solution, hoping to get product market fit. You can put a whole bunch of stuff along with that to make it happen. Because
along with your entrepreneurship, you're also doing like bubble tea and stuff like that too, right?
Yeah. So my wife and I started Bubble Tea Supply in 2001. It's before it even really had a term.
Wow.
So we basically manufacture in Taiwan, and then we distribute out of Dallas for the continental U.S. and then out of here for like Guam, Saipan, maybe some international. So, but that's kind of small.
That's crazy. Yeah. So you basically got to the bubble tea game before it was huge.
It was nothing.
Yeah. I don't remember that as a kid.
It was nothing. Yeah.
2001.
Yeah. But it's actually, it's a popular drink in Taiwan. It's like everywhere. It's like, you know how Starbucks are over here. I mean, they have a whole bunch in Taiwan, and it had been going for maybe a decade or so. So it's not so much like we invented anything. It was basically, this works here. Let's see if it can work here. And then there was some good product market fit, right? Where the market is really wants your product. And then we just kind of built it from there.
Okay, so going back on the Dark Night of the Soul with regards to that, was there any of that aspect of the Dark Night where you're moving from who you were to who you were going to be in terms of building an entrepreneur venture and going into that bubble tea back in 2001? I was like fresh out of college. I didn't know what the hell I was doing.
I think that when I think about it, my wife and I were in a company doing mortgages and real estate. So the idea was, it was right in 98, 99, somewhere around there. And the company said, okay, we're going to go and we're going to try and go public. So we moved with the founders over to California, started to try to fundraise. They changed the plan on us and so on. And it was pretty apparent that, you know, we got to come back home. I had quit school. And I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do, because all my friends now are, you know, they're done with school and they're doing amazing things, and you start comparing and it's like, oh, I suck. What am I going to do? Well, I better go finish school because I can buy myself a little bit of time. I was able to finagle my way into USC, but it was going to take too long. So I said, you know, I'm going to come back home and I'm just going to knock it out at HPU. And I figured I calculated out I can knock out 47 credits in 7 months. And
Jeez.
that's what I ended up doing. And in the meantime,
that's impressive. That's really impressive.
I had to go fast because my track record was not hot. So then in that time period, my wife had gone back to teaching, and then we were doing we started sourcing product and doing that whole thing, you know, out of our house, packing, pick, pack, shipping. Like, people would call it like 2 a.m, and then we would make like we were up and answer like, "Hi, Bubble Tea Supply," and it's like we weren't really up, you know what I mean? And it took like 3 months to get a merchant account. There was no Square, there's no Stripe and stuff back then. It was,
I mean, this was
slow.
like in the beginning stages of the internet. There were no smartphones or nothing.
2001, yeah. So I think that when you talk about like Dark Night of the Soul, what happened was it was a dark period for us coming back home because it felt like failure.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what happens is we have events in our life that either are positive or negative, and then we'll put a meaning on it and saying this is good or bad. But that's just a snapshot in time. Right. Because now when I look back on it 20 years later and I go, best thing never happened to me. Right. And I think that's where the Dark Night of the Soul piece comes in, because I thought I was a loser. I had to go and, you know, tuck my tail between my legs and I don't know what I'm going to do. That ended up working well. And we've had other, you know, and then someone was stealing all my money, and then I had to deal with that one and so on. You know what I mean? You have all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
Like fellow workers and stuff like that, or it was like straight up fraud?
It would have been in your department.
Okay.
For sure. And we decided not to kind of pursue it just because a lot of it was that we didn't want more negative energy and then try to, you know, you don't want to throw good money after bad. Right.
I see.
So it was like a lose-lose at that point. But what it did do is it forced us to separate all of our functions, not only by, you know, vicinity, but by country. I mean, like our functions are separated out. So there's some controls now, and upgraded all of the accounting, upgraded the distribution, upgraded everything. So, you know, for business wise, that worked out pretty well. Yeah.
I mean, you hear stories like that, and people who haven't ventured into entrepreneurship yet, they hear stuff like that, and they're like, well, that's why I don't do it. Because you're gonna lose, you're gonna get stolen from, you know, people are gonna take your money, you're gonna fail.
I mean, some people, yeah. I think though that, because you're an entrepreneur as well, right? Mm-hmm. And I think for most of the entrepreneurs, we typically have something to prove, at least initially. Yeah. And then you use that as one of the places to kind of prove it. And when people are telling you can't do it, it kind of tells you like, sometimes you might take it in a little bit. But once I realized that, I was like, nah, they're wrong. I'll give you a good example on down. Because
I love that. I love that stuff.
I'll give you a good example. So in 2005, I was finishing up the EMBA at UH, right? And instead of doing the project that was supposed to be done, I said, no, I don't want to do that. let me do my own business plan on this concept that I've got, and I'm gonna turn that in. And the professor was like, okay, fine. So I was like, okay, cool. So it was based upon a media program that was going to convince people to do community service and community leadership, right? It was called Greater Good. What? Yeah, like it's a book.
Oh yeah, you got the
right?
book.
So this one.
You have a book here, The Greater Good.
Yeah,
Lessons from Hawaii Leaders.
About 2 months, I think, something like that. It was right after RSS feeds were actually created in order to be able to do podcasting. But there was no broadband, there was no Apple Podcast, there was no iPhone. It was still an iPod. There was nothing. But we said, you know, we want to go and we want to get this thing done. We want to launch this. So I was able to. I lost my train of thought.
You were talking about RSS feeds and starting this whole Greater Good podcast in order to get over.
Where did I start before that, though? Sorry, I'm getting old. Can I help?
Well, it's kind of about the fear of failure.
Okay.
Not even wanting to start.
So what I did then was I was coaching track at Punahou School, and my friend tells me, "Hey, go talk to Dwayne Karisu." And I'm like, "I don't know who's that." He goes, "He's big time over here. He owns part of Aloha Airlines. He owns part of the San Francisco Giants. He has all this, you know, he's the big timer." He goes, "Talk to him and see if." So I was like, "Okay, shoots." So I went in to go and talk to him. And what he told me was, he said, why are you here? And I said, well, I would like you to donate some money to the school so we can help these student athletes, attend school because it's expensive. And he said, that's a waste of my time. That's a waste of my money. And I was like, what? And he said, that's a waste of my money. And I was like, uh-oh, this meeting's going very badly, right? Mm-hmm. And what he said was, you don't use any leverage. I'm like, dude, I don't know what you're talking about. He goes, let me explain to you. He said, I have a foundation. It's called the Hawaii Sports Network Foundation, right? And what we'll do is we will pay for the salaries and give them office space and all that. And all they'll do all day long is help high school student athletes get full ride scholarships. And he said, for every $5,000 I put into this, we got a full ride scholarship. So, that's hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? And he said, so when you can come up with that kind of leverage, I'll give you the money. And I'm like, whew, mind blown, right? So I'm writing all this stuff down. And he tells me, but here's the most important thing for you. And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. He goes, the most important thing is I won't do any business unless it helps the community.
Wow.
And I'm like, dude, I don't know what you're talking about, because don't I just try to get rich first and then I go buy like, stuff and put my name on a building or things like that? And he goes, you're so wrong.
Yeah.
He goes, you're so wrong. He goes, I don't know what you're talking about. And he said, let me explain to you. He said, I bought a bakery on Big Island called Punaluu Bake Shop. It was a real estate deal and a business deal and so on. And we were trying to figure out how this can help the community. And the community up there was having a problem with crystal meth, right? And the problem after that was that if they get off of crystal meth, there's nowhere for them to go. So they kind of get back on. So he said, what if we make this into a training place, a safe area, kind of, we can get these people back on their feet and just really focus on the aloha, right? And that's what they did. And he said, long story short, we did that, and our profits went up by like 500% or something like that.
Jesus.
He said, so when you come up with those two, with leverage and community, then I'll help you. And that's where this whole Greater Good Radio thing came up, because I went in there trying to get money for donations, and then I left thinking, how's our business going to help the community? I was like, what kind of Jedi mind trick is this on me, And that's when my wife said, hey, we should try and get these messages out there. And that's when we had started that podcast. So Dwayne owned the radio station, ESPN 1420. We ended up going on there. And here's the thing. We go in there and we're talking about it. And the general manager at the time tells me, and this is a person that didn't have radio experience. So he basically told me, you guys are not going to be any good at this. So what you need to do is you need to hire Chris Hart to do the interviews and pay him and so on. And he freaked me out about it. I was like, okay, shoot, I'll listen. So I went to go ask Chris, and Chris was like, no, you try first. And if you really need me, then I'll help you out. I said, okay, shoots, we'll do that. And we never ever had to utilize him after that. But that just goes to show that, you know what, if I listened to that person, then it would have been a completely different, path, it might not have worked. Who knows?
So so the interesting thing I'm hearing from these two stories is that, number one, you asked for help, or you asked for, money, you asked for Chris Hart, and you got turned down.
Yeah.
In being turned down, they gave you a little bit of advice that you took and turned around and was able to continue that journey.
It was more like the GM was telling us we couldn't do it, and Chris was kind of like, nah, just try.
Yeah.
And then we said, okay, we'll just try, and by just trying, it went well. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So sometimes you need a little bit extra push, but I think where this came from was, for as entrepreneurs, we're always trying to show that we can do it. You know what I mean? Because I don't know about you, but a lot of the entrepreneurs I know, they all have something kind of going on, typically like ADHD or dyslexia or, you know, some Asperger's or whatever, and we're all kind of a little bit off. So like for the majority of the ones I know, there's some little bit action going on over there.
I'm totally normal. I swear.
Except you know what I mean? So you're the outlier. But
that's true. No, that's definitely true. Like I know that I think, and my brain operates far more than I think it should. I stay up at night. I'm in the shower. Ideas are constantly coming to my mind. And, you know, sometimes I think a lot faster than I can talk, which is sometimes on the podcast why I talk so slow sometimes. It's like my brain is firing off, but I just can't get it into words fast enough.
Is that a problem? I mean,
it's not a problem. I don't think it's a problem at all. I just think it has a lot. I just come up with a lot of ideas, and I don't think it's necessarily normal, because if it was normal, everybody would be doing it. Well, and I don't think everybody's doing it.
Well, maybe everybody or a lot of people might have ideas. Whether they do something about it is different, right?
That's definitely true.
Yeah.
Whether they're willing to take that mental risk and just go ahead and dive into it and say, hey, screw it, I'm going to do it. You know,
I think that there's a lot of people that won't, and then there's some that will, right? Yeah. Some
of it is just getting a kick in the butt to start it. You know, I've seen that. Where there are people, I've talked to some, you know, coworkers who have, you know, great ideas going, and they've actually dipped their toe into entrepreneurship just a little bit. And I see what they're doing. I'm like, dude, you need to stop working overtime, and you need to put that time and effort into this project that you're doing and start selling stuff, because that's great. And that's a start.
Well, typically what happens is you need to have enough pain.
That's true too.
If you have enough pain to go there and you have to do it, then you start to do it. Yeah. Right. I have a friend, Miki Tomita, and she does a lot of these design thinking and kind of like entrepreneur things for kids and so on. And our kids were in the same thing. And I asked her, hey, is your daughter going to do this next one? Because our kids are going to do it. And she's like, no, my daughter decides she don't want to do it. I go, what? Why don't you just tell her to do it? She goes, no, I can't. This and that. I go, I give my kids a choice. They can either, one, choose to do it on their own, or two, I make you. And they're like, that's not a choice. She goes, oh, you voluntold them. And I said, voluntold. I'm going to steal that. That's great. Yeah, I voluntold them. And that's what the universe tends to do to us when we are off track or so on, right? We get voluntold. And it usually involves pain.
Okay, so one of the questions I wanted to ask you, Evan, was why brain gain, and how did that come about? Okay. And what are you doing necessarily with that?
So in the end of 2018, my son and I, we were just, you know, trading, you know, financial products and so on, and just having fun. Other business was doing fine. Everything was kind of fine. And then around November of 2018, my wife got really sick. Oh. So what happened? Sick to the point where we thought, oh God, she might die.
This could be it.
Yeah. And I have 4 kids. They're all in private school. It's expensive. I'm caregiving for my dad as well. And it was just overwhelming. So I'm like, I started freaking out. Like, what am I going to actually do? Because I don't really move the needle on my other businesses that much. You know what I mean? I can put a lot of work in. I don't have to do anything. It still grows. I don't move it that much. So I'm like, what am I going to do? You know what I mean? Do I need to go get a job now after so long, or what am I going to do? I don't know. So I called a friend and I was like, hey, what do you think? Can I work with you in recruiting? Because my wife was asking me, she said, you know, why don't you just be a headhunter? Why don't you just do recruiting? Because you're doing it for free anyways. And that's how I've always done it, is just to help people out. So it didn't work out for that. It came January 1. I was cooking noodles like a good Chinese son. I mistaken what I was doing, and I was trying to get the noodle off the side of the pot. And I swished it like that with the boiling water, and I missed, and then it went all over my stomach. And then I went, and I rubbed all my stomach, and then all my skin rubbed off.
Oh.
So then I had 6 weeks of healing up that, second degree burns. And then after that, I got sick for 2 months, like bedridden, sick, all kind of antibiotics and whatever. I didn't even know what it was. And then I had, at that point, I was pretty solid. I was like, you know what? I think I can do this. I'm going to do my own kind of firm and so on.
After you've gotten burned.
After I got burned, right? I set up, because of Greater Good Radio, we have a lot of really good relationships with, leaders in town. I set up about 5 different meetings with some of the largest company CEOs here. And then I went out and bought a one-wheel motorized skateboard to go and practice my foiling on land. And then I fell down and I broke my back. So, yeah.
This is not a funny story. Yeah. I'm sorry.
So I fell down. I broke my back. I was paralyzed for a bit.
God, dude.
I couldn't go bathroom. And then I was like, oh, man, this is...
Now, what time span is all this happening to you?
I broke my back in April 28, 2019.
And what about the burns and the getting sick?
The burn was January 1, and the sick was somewhere in mid-February.
So within the same few months.
Yeah, it was basically one after the other, after the other, after the other.
Okay.
And all I was trying to do was get my new business going, right? My wife, in the meantime, we have a friend who turned us on to, kind of reintroduced us to a spiritual advisor, who's a friend of mine actually from high school. And my wife went to see him, and he helped her out quite a bit. She was making really good progress. And she told me, you better go see him because you're worse than me. I mean, bro, I had a Handyvan pass. I'm not joking. I had a Handyvan pass. I had a walker. You know what I mean? I didn't know if I was going to ever do sports ever again. You know what I mean? I thought I'm out.
So here's your wife who's like mortally ill almost. And she's like, no, you're worse than me.
Yeah, you're worse than me. Yeah. So she started to get better. And then so I went, and then what he asked me was basically like, well, what's the mission of your company? Because I'm like, I want to just work. And, I'm lying down on the ground. And he's like, what's the mission? And I said, well, it's just to kick everyone's ass. Isn't that a good mission? Right? And he's like, nope. And he said, well, I hate to break this to you, but if you continue on this path that you're going down and you just keep pushing forward, then your next injury is going to be worse. And I'm like, dude, I can't take a worse injury. I'm on every painkiller. I mean, I can barely move. I'm in too much pain. I'm not taking a worse injury. He said, well, what you need to do then is you need to really figure out your spiritual alignment. And I'm like, what? Whatever that is, I'm going to figure it out because I'm in way too much pain.
And nothing else working.
Nothing. So, and I had a lot of fear because I'm like, dude, I don't want to take this next injury, right? So I was already afraid of stuff. So then I spent a whole bunch of time in, all kinds of therapies, all kinds of, everything, meditations, everything. And what happened was it just kind of came to me. My dad in 2014 got leukemia. So we moved him to Seattle, which is pretty much the best leukemia care you can get. Mm-hmm. His younger brother gave him a bone marrow transplant to stay alive. And then he died. And when we're up there, everyone was freaked out. And my uncle's best friend told me, she said, this is the worst day of my life. My best friend's going to pass away. And my only daughter tells me she can't come home to Hawaii because she can't get the right job. And like normal, I would say, okay, well, have her send us the resume and then try and send it out and see if we can help her out, right? So we get the resume. It shows Punahou School. It shows Berkeley undergrad, Berkeley Law School, big law firm, and running legal for City of Hope, which is a big medical center in California, which means that a similar type of job here, there's pretty much only 3 places you're going to go: Kaiser, Queens, or Hawaii Pacific Health. Okay. Right? My brother's the attorney for Kaiser. So he ended up taking it to Kaiser, to the medical group side, and they told him, they said, Darren, this is amazing because 2 days ago, we just approved our first head of legal here that Kaiser's ever been in Hawaii, and this person will be perfect.
Nice.
So fast forward, she gets hired, husband moves down, he's a cancer researcher, but cancer research center's on hold, so we're trying to help him get into UH and so on. Kids get into school and all that. Now I'm in the hospital lying there years later trying to figure out what's my spiritual alignment so I don't get hurt again. And her mom emails me out of the blue, and it says, Evan, I just want to tell you that I think about you every day. I'm thankful for you. And without you, I would not have my only daughter here, her husband, and her grandkids. And she said, she basically was inviting me to dinner. She didn't know I was hurt.
Okay.
And that's when I looked at it and said, wow, this is something else, man. If I can help people in either their career, their health, or their relationships, which are 3 huge ones, where if you're off, your life's off, then that person's stronger. And if you have a stronger person, then you'll have a stronger family. And if you have a stronger family, we have a stronger community. And if we have a stronger community, we have a stronger state. This resonates with me. This sounds good. I'm going to go with this. And that's when it became Brain Gain Hawaii, which is about bringing people back home and so on. And then it was about strengthening families. And that's why the slogan says strengthening families. I started to work in July of 2019. It was the first day I started to work doing this. 2019 at the time was the best financial year I've ever had.
Nice.
It was far greater than anything else I'd ever done. And I only really worked half the year. So that's kind of where, Brain Gain more or less came from.
So what exactly were you doing in that time when you started up Brain Gain? Like, what were you doing to, I guess, bring in all that income, going from injury, being on the bed, not doing anything, to having the best financial year of your life?
Well, our bubble tea one's always been steady. So that one kind of takes care of itself. The big impact was I did a lot of recruiting placements. I did a lot. And then what ended up happening is that people tend to come to me in a transition. They're in a transition of some sort. They're trying to figure something out. And just because of the stuff that I had to go through and everything else, I noticed things. And what I kept noticing over and over is that when people feel like their life is a bit off, they're trying to make a change. And when I'm talking to them and saying, I want to switch jobs because of this, this, and this, and I'm listening and I'm going, wait a minute, this doesn't sound like a logistical issue, like, oh, I'm just moving up position or so on. This is actually an inner issue. Then now I just feel it's part of my kuleana to be able to help them with that if they want. Because the issue, it's like this: if you say I want to go and have a new career or so on, and the real reason is because you have unresolved baggage going on inside of your internal system, and you don't resolve that, your next thing is going to look exactly the same.
Right. You're just going to take all that baggage with you.
Yeah. It's like if you have a girlfriend, and then you're like, I don't like this girlfriend anymore, but you didn't resolve what's inside of you. Guess what the next girlfriend looks like? It's exactly the same, right? So the common denominator is the person. It's like wherever you go, there you are, right? Yeah. So that's why these days I spend a lot more time in the realm of, I guess, what you would call coaching, but it kind of sits between that spiritual realm, kind of therapeutic realm, but also all the best practices of, moving forward in your career and whatever else. I mean, we want to talk about, best practices for entrepreneurship and so on. I'm right in there too. It's just that the acceleration for that is kind of hampered if you're not navigating properly, and you can't really navigate properly if you're not healed.
Right.
So it's like a boat, right? Most of the time people are like, I want to do this. I'm going to learn these things. I'm going to be faster, quicker. That's like me taking the boat and saying, I'm going to polish the hull. I'm going to make a stronger motor. I'm going to do all these things. But 1, we don't know where the boat's going. 2, boat's got holes in it with anchors all over the place, stuck in the reef. That boat ain't flying. The thing that's hard is to heal up the anchors and the holes. Mm-hmm. That's where most people, and that's where we get voluntold into. And that's where that dark night of the soul comes into play, right? But for the ones that actually make it through that and can do the inner healing, which is painful, but necessary, almost like working out, right? Then your whole perspective in the navigation period is way different. Because there's a huge difference, as we mentioned kind of in our pre-talk, there's a really big difference between the energy of moving away from something, like I'm fearful of it, I want to move away from it, I don't ever want to feel that again, and so on, versus this is what I love and this is what I'm meant to be doing. There's huge differences, even if the destination looks the same. So by healing and releasing initially, then we can navigate in an entirely different scope, right? There's a saying that says perception is projection. Like if we feel like the world's a dangerous place, what we're going to see is a dangerous world, right? So if we're healed up from that and we see it, this world is a loving place, we see a loving world, that's a way different mindset to approach your navigation of what your values are, your beliefs, and where you want to go. And then the acceleration part is fairly simple, or simpler, right? But most people are kind of backwards, and that's what I was doing backwards, which is I just want to accelerate. I just want to crank. I just want to execute. I want to do it better. I want to do it faster.
That brings to mind like a lot based on again mindset and getting to the right place in the right frame of mind. And part of that, even just to get to the right frame of mind, is that healing and is that self-awareness, is looking in the mirror and seeing who you really are and who you really want to be and what's really wrong with you and how you can fix that.
Okay, so let me touch on one piece of that, right? Which is what's wrong with you and how you can fix that. That implies that we're not enough and we need to do things or be things or so on, right? So I want to do this so I can have this, where it's actually I want to be something else. You know what I mean? This is what my friend Pono Shem, who's a good mentor, you should have him on the show as well, was talking to me about it and said, this is about being, you know what I mean? Not doing and having. We're a human being, not a human do, not a human have, right?
Right.
And there are two different models when you look at this, right? One is a pathologizing model, right? Like the pathologizing model says, you, EO, you have ADHD, you have some other things and so on. So we're going to throw a whole bunch of more constraints on you. Like you can't do these things.
Right.
I'm going to medicate you. I'm going to do these things because then you can become the better person that you should be, right? The other model is called constraint release, which says you, EO, came into this life when you first took your first breath, your first ha, as a wondrous spirit. You are everything that you need to be or are. And through the period here of your life, there's constraints that have been put on top of you, which changes your thoughts about yourself and all that kind of stuff. And what we need to do is to help release those so you can let your true self come through. So a good story kind of to bring this is that there's a huge Buddha statue in, I think it's Thailand, but I'm not sure. So
that massive one they just built?
They didn't just build it. So what happened was, it's like a stone looking giant Buddha statue. And then they were going to redevelop the area, something like that. So they moved it, right? They moved it with whatever they moved it with, and it started to crack. So the monk at night, it was like, oh man, the Buddha statue, I'm responsible for this thing. I go check it out. And he took some type of light and he was checking it out and he was like, whoa, what's up? Thing's shiny. It's kind of reflecting back. So he started taking a chisel and started chiseling away. And underneath all that clay, what it was a solid gold Buddha statue. And what had happened was hundreds of years before, it was a solid gold statue. Some army was coming to take over that area. And what they did was they covered it. They covered it up in mud and clay and stones and stuff to make it look like it was worthless. But actually inside, it's solid gold. So a constraint release type of philosophy is more like that. Like you, EO, are actually gold, and we just need to get the clay off. Versus you are not, and now you have to go and attain these things or do these things so you can become something.
Right. You're not
you
clay
already
and
are
then
something.
adding gold onto you. No.
Yep. You are something. So that's I think a different way of looking at it.
That's a perfect way of looking at it. I like that. It's really good. I remember hearing about that story about the Buddha statue and then finding it. Yeah. Miracles, things like that. Like, hey, if it didn't break, they never would have found it. They would have moved it. Who knows when history would have found that. But to bring that back to, mindset and I think so many people that I encounter still have that. They're covered in clay. Thick mounds of clay. Yeah.
I mean, there's different models out there, however you want to call it, therapeutic models or so on. And one that I really like is called Internal Family Systems, IFS for short. And it basically the same type of constraint release model. You have a self. That self comes in with you at birth. It leaves with you. It doesn't have to be trained. It already is. Great. The issue is that when you have traumatic things happen to you, it kind of gets hidden or protected, and then the system doesn't know how to identify with it any longer. So that in itself, when you think about it, you have a wounded part, right? A part that something happens. So trauma is not what happens to you, but it's what happens in you as a result of what happens to you. Because you and I could have the same trauma, external event, but we react differently because the meaning that we make internally and what happens neurologically in our bodies, right? So there's the wounded part that we're trying to protect, because that one is the one that holds the painful emotions. And anytime it rears its head, then the rest of the system, the protective parts, want to say, hell no. So you have the ones that are like, never again. I'm going to be pretty all the time. I'm going to work. I'm going to be successful. I'm going to have so much money. I'm going to do this because never again am I going to feel like that. But once it passes that, then we hit the vices like, any kind of substances,
drugs,
sex,
alcohol,
drugs,
yeah.
cutting, and then eventually potentially suicide, right? Mm-hmm. And this is a system that needs to be worked through. But the beauty is that it can actually be healed up. And then the protective parts no longer have to do that job. That's a whole different way of approaching it. All the surface level rigmarole.
Yeah.
And then when stuff kind of relaxed and so on, then it was like stuff came out.
Yeah, because there's a lot of great content that just came out off camera. I'm so glad that you came on and decided to come on the show, because it's been very enlightening for me. Off camera, you were asking me why I'm doing this. And I answered, and you said, well, why? And I answered again. He said, well, why? And you're trying to get deeper and deeper as to my why. And I think I'm still trying to answer that, even as I go forward. I don't think it's a simple answer. I think, and you kind of broke it down where, there's a lot of healing that needs to happen. And that's kind of leading me towards why I'm ultimately trying to help other people, or trying to help myself, or trying to become famous, or whatever the means may be. There is a lot of underlying issues and underlying tones that go along with what makes me want to get away from one job and get into and dive into this passion project, future profession. And I think it was really fantastic feeling. I think even though I don't think I actually got an answer, but just to know that if you continue asking yourself why you're doing something, and why and why and why, and having someone push like that, you can dig real deep and get, some deep either answers or deep questions that need answering.
When I asked you that question, where were the answers coming from? Which part of your body?
Brain.
Okay. The whole time, right?
Yes.
So the hard thing on that is that the real answers, guess where they're supposed to come from? Somewhere between your heart and your gut.
Yeah.
There's actually a thing called the vagus nerve. So the vagus nerve goes it controls the autonomic nervous system, which is basically our nervous system, right? Mm-hmm. It goes from the brain stem all the way down into the gut. There's way more messages that get sent from the gut and the heart to the brain than goes the opposite way. This is a whole system. The nerve goes down, it branches out, and that's what determines everything from, fight, flight, freeze, or please, or so on, whether you're regulated, self-regulated, or not. And that, I talk to a lot of people that are in a transition, and without a doubt, they'll go straight into their head and try to think it through.
Sure.
But what I was told is that I was told that for Buddhist people, thinking was another sense, kind of like eyesight, hearing, smell, taste, things like that. Mm-hmm. It wasn't meant to live there, right? But we identify with it so heavily that that's where we always go. I mentioned it a little bit earlier, where when people are looking at stuff, you're either typically in navigation or acceleration, right? Acceleration is you're executing your strategy, your tactics, all that stuff. Okay. Navigation is like, where am I going? Mm-hmm. Your values, your beliefs, and so on. Why? Your why. And then before that, you have pain and wounds and baggage and so on that needs to be released, right? And the order typically to make this work right is going to be release work first, and then your perception changes, and then you go into navigation, determine where you're going, and then you kind of accelerate. Well, the healing portion and the navigation, that's not coming from the head.
Right.
the mind, the brain part, is actually executing on what the heart and gut set as the course. That it's in that order. So if you go back into that, and the whys part, it was called 5 whys. It was invented by Toyota. They were doing it for their quality control to find the root cause issues. Is that the first couple might go into your head, but after that, it's heart and gut, and the answer actually percolates up like almost like a memory, that versus forcing thought into there, right? So if you approach it that way, you'll probably get much better results. And then when your heart and your gut align with your head, and when what you are meant to do aligns with what you want to do, then it's on. Because you've had it before where everything goes smooth and it's not a lot of effort for some reason. It might be working, but it's not exhausting. You know what I mean? And that's what we want. That's the flow state, right?
Yeah, in some aspects, actually a lot of aspects, I feel like this podcast is going in that direction where doors are opening for me. And I'm asking and receiving, and it's just the path is becoming easier and easier to follow, and easier to go down with this. And I talk about ideas and stuff that I want to do in the future, in the next few months even, and those are more and more coming to light and coming into being. So it's making it a lot easier to just go ahead and do it. It's not a struggle to do this show, so to speak, So I am finding that this is one of the things that I think, I'm here to do here on this planet. I think that the mark that I leave on this planet is going to be creating an environment where other people can come and do similar or the same things that I've done and make names for themselves in the same spot that I'm making a name for myself.
And why is that important to you?
Because I want to make a name for myself.
Why?
Because I want to be famous.
But why? What does it do for you? If you were famous,
No.
what would that do for you?
No, I don't want to be famous. I just want I do want to be recognized for the efforts that I put forth in terms of just all the hard work that I've gone through and all the BS that I've had to deal with through my life. I don't want to say I had a hard life. It wasn't a hard life, so to speak. It was definitely not an easy life, but through those struggles, I think I've seen that other people who have less struggles can still achieve and accomplish a lot more. I have a lot where I do want to help other people do great stuff, but I also don't feel like I'm quite there yet to be that person to help, and that's why I'm trying to make myself that expert or that resource for them in order to help. I think it comes back to the underlying issue that when I tried to start this, I didn't have help. It was all on my own, and I did ask for help, and I got a little bit here and there, from some friends and stuff, but a lot of it, I wasn't getting any help. I think one of the other underlying issues is self-reliance. I think I've had to deal with doing things on my own and getting it done on my own and not asking for help. Good and bad. In some ways that, I learn independence. In other ways, there's some self-destructive issues there too with not asking for help when you really should be asking for help. And one of this platform here, it's meeting people, networking with people, and making it easier for me to ask for that assistance, for that help. Just like reaching out to you on LinkedIn and being, hey, come on the show. I definitely would not have been that person to reach out and ask someone to come onto my show just a year ago, And I want to be able to ask anybody for anything. I'm going to say is no. And building through that, it is a struggle.
So all of that struggle, because this is kind of a theme for your stuff, right?
Yeah.
What pain is it solving?
It's not so much dealing with the pain too much. It's dealing with leaving something for my children to look back on in case something ever happens to me.
Because it'll make you feel what?
It'll make me feel secure in knowing that my sons will know who their father is years and years and years later, should anything happen to me. Part of recording, putting myself out on YouTube and these other platforms is leaving the space for my kids to come back and look on and say, hey, there's dad. It's something that I don't have. And a lot of people that have lost parents as children, they don't have. All they have is your memories of your parent. You don't have. All I have left to share with my sons about their grandfather is what memories I have of him and pictures. I don't think there's any videos that we have of him. So that's one of the things I do want to leave. Is that, hey, there is video content of your dad out there. So
you're talking about connection.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Allowing your kids to have a connection with you that you were not able to have on your own.
Right.
Right? Makes you feel more safe and whole. Right?
Right.
So you're getting closer. Right? To the real why, which is the root piece, which is where everything else is going to come from. So you're getting close. You're getting closer. And it's, it's going to come from your heart. It's going to come from your gut. That's where the piece is going to come from. Because think about this. You can go back ahead. What if you didn't have any of those kind of hang-ups? Where would your project, if you were really into it, be right now?
Well, if I had none,
Yep.
Yeah, I would have. I don't want to say it on air, but the future plans that I have for this, not just podcast, but a studio, and helping produce other shows, which is going to come in the next month. Is what the plan is.
But you'd have way less friction.
Totally less friction.
Less friction, less self-doubt, less holding yourself back. Because think about it. What if what you had placed onto your goals and so on for the next however many months it's been, in reality could be done in the next few days if you weren't scared to do it or had doubt to do it?
Huge.
Right?
Yeah.
Because it's not like you're lacking in tactics and skills. I mean, you already invented your own product. You have a patent on it. You distribute it worldwide out of here. And so, I mean, you don't have a tactic issue. You don't have an execution real issue. That's not the issue.
No.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
It's constraint release is the issue. Yeah. And letting that golden EO come through. That's where it's at.
What if they're stuck in the same position I am, or you are, or anybody
Aren't they
else
all?
is?
I mean, we hit this season of life, especially if the audience is in this late 30s to probably late 40s kind of range. That's when things start to change a lot, which is we're hitting the last stretch of our productive income earning years. And a lot of people are trying to figure out, hey, what is this really going to be about? How is this going to matter? How am I going to be fulfilled? I've already won awards and done all these things. It's not really floating my boat anymore, right? That's where release, navigation come into play, and then you accelerate. I think a lot of people are going through it. So with you and like John and so on, it's about connection, right? My friend Pono Shim, good mentor for many, many people. He talks about connection versus correction. A lot of times we want to correct. Don't do this, this, and that. But it's actually about connecting, right? And you know that too when I heard you talk about as a police officer, right? as you're talking to people or even interrogating them, whatever you want to call it, you can actually probably get more done if you connect versus just correct. Because guess what? You start correcting and then all the other stuff comes up and then the walls all go up and nobody wants to talk. So I think one thing that I'll leave is that what I've learned, at least in the last 2 years, pretty intensely, is that everything is internal. It's not external. Everything is internal. It's not external. External is just a mirror image of what's going on internally. So if we really want change, if we really want stuff to get better, then we need to go inside and get better. And that's how things change. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a great part of this, this whole podcast series is that it's changing, the internal mindset of people.
Which starts,
it starts with the mindset, but you're going deeper into the soul.
So if you're going to talk about changing the mindsets of people, then that has to start first with the mindset of who?
This guy right here.
Right. I heard there was a good saying I heard before is like, if you want to inspire others, then you be inspired. You be inspired and then people get inspired.
Yeah.
Right? Instead of I'm trying to inspire you. I am inspired. And then you just can't help but be inspired by it if that's the case. Right? So it'll be exciting to see where you take this.
Awesome. Evan, I'm so glad you said yes to come on.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
I hope you had a great time.
Yeah, it was fun.
All right, everyone. Evan Leong. All right, and as always, stay happy, Hawaii. Gotta throw the shakas, bro.
Oh, shaka bra, shaka.